All right, hello everybody, and welcome back to another episode, another anniversary episode of Back to the Blockbuster with your hosts Gaius and Jackson. Today, taking a look at Zack Snyder's directorial debut with 2004's Dawn of the Dead, a remake of George Romero's 1978 classic. I believe it was
Yep.
78, which also would have been a fantastic movie to cover on this. I hope we get around to talking about that someday. But today, we're talking about the 2004 version. This was a fun rewatch, I think, for both of us. Only my second time looking at this movie in probably just as many years. But tell me a little bit, Gaius, about your experience with Snyder's version.
First of all, I want to thank everyone that actually this is your listeners' pick. You
Yeah,
guys
that's right.
chose Dawn of the Dead as an anniversary episode. Jackson and I were very low key happy that you did because this was I thought it'd be a really good fun one to cover for a few reasons. I hadn't watched it in a while, and also a lot of retrospective reviews on the movie have called this Zack Snyder's best film, and I was wanted to also have that part of the discussion too, where his
Whoa.
career has definitely seen some bumps, some hits and some bumps. I think there is a good case to be made for like Watchmen as well as being one of his good movies.
Ooh, yeah. Or
Too
300, like both of those movies,
300,
I think blow this one out of the
yeah,
water personally. But definitely
yeah.
a sign that he
So
was progressing as a filmmaker after this for sure.
yeah, exactly. And also, we are actually recording this episode on the actual anniversary. It came out on March 19th, 2004. So perfect timing for this one. Another good reason for us to switch the recording date to Tuesday this week. They worked out.
Yeah, kind of worked out in
Um,
their favor.
but yes, it is a remake of George A. Romero's classic film. I actually like Dawn of the Dead, his version of Dawn of the Dead. But
Mm.
Zack Snyder's approach is very different, and I actually like that. And I think that's kind of like where the movie gets praised for that too. And then there's also things that the remake lacks from the original. Like there is a kind of sense of like biting like satire in the original Dawn of the Dead, and that's
Oh,
absent from
100%.
this.
Yeah. The
That's completely
satire on
absent from.
commercialism. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
This feels like a Zack Snyder's is very much more, I think, a reimagining of George Romero's more than like your
yeah.
typical remake of the same plot. Honestly, most of it that it has in common is that it's set majoritively at
And
a
the mall.
shopping mall. Yeah. Beyond
Yeah, yeah,
that, there's a lot different. The movies are very
yeah.
different.
And that is where like you said, the similarities kind of end there.
Yeah, for the
You
most
know,
part.
it this is very much kind of what I appreciate because it's entertaining. I mean, I like I said, I hadn't watched it in a really long time. I did see this on opening night in theaters when it came out. Um,
Nice.
and one of the main reasons I was like, because I'm not usually into zombie movies all that much, but this is Dawn of the Dead. This remake seems to be cut from the same cloth that they kind of went with, like with 28 Days Later, where like the whole like
Hmm.
notion of like, you can make zombies pretty scary now if they're like running at you like
Running at
pro
you full
athletes.
speed? Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, that movie
yeah.
very much inspired, I think, this one.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you can tell there's a lot of it in it, and I was actually I love that when they did that with 28 Days Later, and I was happy that they kind of kept that going with a movie like this too, where you know I'm not knocking anything like Night of the Living Dead or even the original Dawn of the Dead, but it's hard to be afraid of something that moves at you at like a snail pace, and it's like
At least in
it
these days, yeah, for sure.
yeah, yeah. So I've always felt some zombie movies lack that kind of intensity, and this one at least has that. I mean, it kind of. I remember seeing this on opening night, and that opening, like just the opening, what 10 minutes, maybe a little less than that. It
Mm.
comes at you like right away. Like there's like it is just like it. It's one of the better openings from a movie like this, I think, and I kind of love that it just plops you into the middle of this chaos, and it's like when you start a movie like that, it's like, oh, they're not fucking around. Like this, they want to make something like really intense and scary. And um, but looking at it now, I still think the movie holds up pretty well. You mentioned the thing with Zack Snyder. I personally think this is his best movie. I might switch it out with like Watchmen sometimes, but
Okay,
um,
yeah.
and his career as like a lot of people know, right? It's like he's done stuff like this, but then he's also done like, Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
great. And then peop then there's the whole Man of Steel. That's another one that people like. I don't dislike it as much as most, but some people have their feelings about that too.
For sure.
Um, I mean, and then Justice League wasn't really like his fault, and he got to at least get his director's cut of that out eventually, and that is a better film than the theatrical cut of that particular movie. But I don't know, like I think coming out the gate with a debut like this is what I was most impressed with. Like he kind of showed like a really like a great strength for like the genre too. It was with a debut like this. And also, I did not know this when it first came out. It took me a long time to find out that James Gunn wrote this. I did
I
not know
know.
this for a
I
really
forgot
long
about
time.
that. Yeah, I don't think that I had considered that when I first watched it, or if I did, I completely forgot. Honestly,
Yeah,
just prefacing that whole point, I gotta say it is the screenplay of this movie that I disliked the most of the movie. I honestly thought it was kind of
that's fair.
weak.
Yeah,
It's not Zack Snyder's like what because ultimately I didn't get a chance to say this yet, but this is one of those movies where my enjoyment of it did diminish on rewatch. I didn't like it
oh,
as much as I remembered. And that's not to say I didn't like it. You hit the nail on the head when you said this is entertaining. This is a great popcorn zombie flick. I watched this with my girlfriend. She joined me for this watch, and I think
yeah.
we both, were entertained enough. She is more inclined to kind of be on her phone throughout we're watching stuff, which I tried just to
that
ignore, and she's not
that
as into it
sounds
as I am.
so familiar.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what happens when I watch movies with Kayla. I was like, "Are you even paying attention?" And she's like, "Oh yeah,
But
I'm
I
totally
don't hold
paying
it
attention."
against
Like,
her. But for the most
yeah,
part, when the zombie muckage was going on, we were both entertained. There was some dialogue that's kind of funny. It has a lot of both the James Gunn and Zack Snyder's personality are definitely all over this movie. But
yeah,
it's really down to the dialogue that like just kind of it's nitpicky, but like I don't know, kind of took me out of it a little bit. One thing
yeah,
too, I think for the time, if I had seen this in 2004 when it came out, I think this would have been like the zombie movie of the time. I guess 28 days later, those movies would have been, cut from the same cloth. They would have been leading the
right,
charge for zombie cinema at that time.
right,
Kind of leading the new wave, and I think I would have really, really enjoyed it had I seen it then. I liked it when I saw it the first time, and I still like it. But like I'm like, okay, I've had enough. I don't really feel like I need to like see this movie all that often or that many more times. But I do appreciate the 18A rating. The gore and the violence is just what you want
it's
from a zombie
a
movie.
gory mess.
Yeah,
Yes, a wonderfully
absolutely it
gory
is.
mess.
Yeah, lots of
Which is
great zombie kills.
crazy because some of the complaints from review like this is like still his best reviewed movie on Rotten Tomatoes too. But some of
Wow,
the
in 20
criticism, yeah, I
years
know,
since.
yeah, some of the criticism of that some people had was that the movie was excessively gory and
It's a zombie
and
movie, people.
yeah, I know, I was like
Like,
that's
come
ridiculous.
on.
But I do think when comparing the two movies, the original and this one, you kind of like it's a matter of like picking what direction you prefer. So there, I think what this movie lacks, and I agree with the screenplay part of it, there isn't a ton of character development, and that you're kind of just thrown in with like a group. And I mean,
Of
some people get more
archetypes.
screen time. Yeah,
Yeah.
and yes, yeah, very much so. And some of them get more screen time than others, but like
Yeah.
you don't really get to like. There's not a lot of like. uh there's not much there. You can tell that they were more focused on making like something that was more visceral and less character driven, and
Yeah, and
that
that's
is,
okay.
yeah, yeah, and I think there are some things script wise that I think do work. I Ving Rhames' character. I love the whole like exchange with the whiteboards and all that stuff with that particular
Agreed.
character.
With
I
Andy.
thought that was like
Yeah.
actually a nice touch, and actually probably one of the more emotional things that happens in the movie when they kind of form this kind of like friendship from across the way, and then of
Yeah.
course if you've seen it, things don't end well for Andy. Um, so I thought there were little character beats like that I thought were good, but it is a matter of like preference whether you were like, okay, this one doesn't, it's not gonna have it's not gonna be character driven, and it's not gonna it's not gonna have the satire that Romero put in his, and I know that is one of the main reasons why he personally doesn't like this remake. He's voiced that, but I don't know. I guess it depends on like what your vibe is. I mean,
Hmm.
what did you kind of think? Do you like 'cause you are like you said, you are kind of plopped in with a bunch of archetypes. They are very much like movie 101 stereotypes, all these characters, which is fine, I guess, but like
I
that's
mean,
what you kind of get here.
yes, it is. I mean, I think at the time maybe it works a little bit better, maybe just because we've seen a lot of these archetypes in a lot of other different forms of media since that it's kind of just felt
Yeah,
tired at this point. But again, I'm looking at it with a 2024 angle, not a 2004 angle, so that's hard to
yeah,
critique that way. But just kind of how I felt while I was watching it.
yeah,
But then it also made like fundamentally, like everyone in this movie virtually is a stranger to each other, so it would kind of make sense you
right,
wouldn't know much about each other, the main cast, when they're in the mall, because they're all strangers
right,
for the
right,
most part.
right.
But in terms of like resonating with the characters, caring about who lives or who dies, wanting to follow certain characters over others, I don't really feel like there's that much of it in here. I honestly kind of wish that there was more obstacles for them to face inside the mall, like in terms of like zombies. Like once they get to the mall, it's pretty much safe. It's I guess each other
Yeah,
that they're kind of looking out for
yeah. They
versus like
become yeah,
yeah. There's some antagonists that are already in the mall, sort of like the mall security that were already posted up there when our main group gets there. That's kind of for a while they're at odds with each other, and that sort of changes as
yeah,
the month of that the movie takes place over goes by. And then we
yeah,
get a couple sequences of zombies inside the mall too, from outsiders being brought in, and kind of as they figure out exactly how the zombie plague is being spread. There's a couple people that are brought in with bites already, and that takes
right.
time. And however, yeah, overall, like the character development, not where this movie shines. I think it really shines in its effects, which for the most part hold up
Yeah,
pretty well for
they
20
look great.
years.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, this movie had a $28 million budget, I think, which was slashed at the time, but still, for what it's worth, the zombie makeup and effects are great. There's some spotty, like fire CGI and like some
yeah, yeah.
eyeball CGI that
Oh yeah,
doesn't quite hold up.
that moment does stand out. Yeah, for sure. I was like,
Which one?
oh,
I'm thinking of. Yeah, the zombie
that might, yeah,
baby's eyes are like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah,
okay, but you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
for a movie with a budget this size in the 2000s, like I honestly think the zombies are the highlight for sure.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. What I've always liked about I think is good in a lot of these kind of zombie movies is where of course you have these like the zombies are like these outside forces that are after them, right? But then what is interesting about these movies sometimes is that okay, now like you said, they're all strangers to each other. They have to kind of like trust each other, and then it's this kind of like thing where once they realize, okay, this is how it spreads, like do they have like an obligation to like let the other people in the situation know? And you kind of see that with Mekhi Phifer and his situation with his wife and like baby, because she's been bit and all
Yeah,
that. And eventually he, of course, he's like disappeared to basically like take care of her, and like they find out, of course, why. And
yeah,
I think that kind of character stuff is interesting. And I, other than how the zombie baby looks, I always thought that was still like a sad outcome. Yeah.
yeah.
It's like what would you do in his situation? Like, it's still your lady and it's still like, having your baby. So like that part of it I thought was
Interesting
pretty
plot dynamic without a
yeah,
doubt. I liked how that all, for the most part, played out. I wasn't
yeah.
huge on Mekhi Phifer, honestly, and I think having his wife, girlfriend, just randomly be Russian for like no apparent reason was a strange like
I know,
symptom,
really
I think,
weird.
of the time. Like I think that was like
Yeah.
James Gunn being like, oh, let's make one of these characters have a little quirky random dynamic, and let's make her foreign for some random reason. There was no real reason that had to be the case. It just kind of felt weird to me, but I digress. I like where all that leads. 100%, definitely an interesting,
Yeah.
darker part of the story too. When Anna takes it upon herself to dispatch the newly born zombie baby, that was
Zombie
quite
maybe. Yeah.
quite something. I don't know if we really see a whole lot of that in other zombie films, but I
Yeah.
do remember that scene coming. I was like, oh yeah, this is that opening burst when Luna is like her
Oh
water
yeah.
breaks and there's a blood
Breaks. Yeah.
splatter underneath her. Oh, it was hard to
Yeah.
watch.
Yeah. I honestly think, and I think this kind of relates to what you were saying with like the script. I think what the movie does accomplish though, and I think it's the actors probably do a bit more. They at least probably offer a bit more than like what's on paper because it's a pretty good, solid cast. You got like Sarah Polley, Ving Rhames, Jake Weber, Mekhi Phifer, Ty Burrell. I forgot he was in this too. From
Yeah,
Modern Family,
yeah.
Michael Kelly, Kevin
Steve.
Zegers. Like it's a pretty good cast as well, and so I think they make up for like what is kind of missing in some of the screenplay a bit because like and just them being that good. I mean, Sarah Polley is I think a pretty effective like lead actress for this movie, even though this is more of like an ensemble. But she, of course, she kicks off the movie in a really big way. I mean, what did you think of that opening when you, I guess, saw it the first time and then like kind of rewatching it for the?
It's a pulse pounding intro. I like the opening when she's in the hospital and she's kind of just ignoring these signs of like the broader apocalypse kind of unfolding slowly throughout the
Yeah,
course of her. She's wrapping up her day as a nurse, and we see some people being brought into the hospital with these various injuries, and we're hearing news broadcasts about not a localized incident, and we don't really have the context of what's going on. But if you know anything about zombie lore and zombie cinema, we as the audience are picking up on these things, and it's kind of amusing to watch the our protagonist kind of like not really consider the broader implications of this clear
yeah,
warning signs that are going on around the world at this point. So for her to, she drives home, she has a pretty mundane night with her husband, and then I'm glad it doesn't play on it too long, because the next day they wake up and their neighbor Vivian, I think was her name, or
yeah,
Lillian, the little girl, neighborhood girl, is in their house with a chewed
yeah,
off face. And then from
yeah,
right there, from the rest of the movie, it's pretty ramped up. I want to say too, this movie from that part going forward is an action movie more than it's a zombie horror movie. I don't really find this movie scary at any part. Honestly, it is like an action movie. There's more guns in this. It's more like a John Wick, how much like gunplay there is in this movie. But that's not to say there's not thrills.
Yeah, I think Zack Snyder. I was reading that they, like you said, this is more of like a reimagining than a straight up like remake.
Right.
And like one of the things that he said was like he really set out to make like a kind of like a siege movie. That's what it feels like. It feels like this is more of like kind of like an action driven film than it being like a straight horror movie. And I mean, we talked about before when it comes to remakes, well, I guess one of the things that we can appreciate is if it's not just a carbon copy of the original. And I
agree.
I guess that is a compliment that it can be given. This is not just like a carbon copy of what Romero did. Now, whether or not I'm trying to figure out if any of the satire consumerism stuff from the original, it would have even worked here at all. If they could have like inserted that at all. I don't know if it would fit in 2004, maybe the way he was trying to comment on it back in 78.
I think it's more poignant in 1978 for sure.
Yeah, and I think at a certain point too, I think tonally probably would make sense because of the approach that he went with this, which was more of a just action driven movie rather than trying to say something deeper about culture and
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. This is very much an action driven movie. Like you said, there are guns everywhere. It's excessively violent, but I mean that's what you want from a movie like this.
Absolutely.
As well. But yeah, I that opening, man, we saw with a big group when it came out in theaters, and that the crowd was just going insane, and it was great because it's not something that we like expected at all. No. And like I said, you get like plopped right in the middle of chaos, and it's just like, oh shit, like you know. And I do love that it starts out so mundane, right? Like when you're watching it, you're like, oh, like there are signs that she's ignoring that there's something going on,
right?
But I do love that it's like it would be if the situation was real, like this is a regular day for her, and then that turns into, of course, a nightmare within a day. And
exactly.
And I also like too. Like one of the things that they went back and forth on was whether to explain like where the the source of this came from, like how they were turning into like zombies and all that. But he thought it was better if it would be more realistic. He felt that you wouldn't necessarily know where this is all coming from if you were some of these people like in this situation. It just like you just be like, yeah, you're just kind of in the middle of like something crazy going on, but you don't really know exactly where it came from. So I actually think that was a good choice too, not to have some like some self-pository scene about like, oh, this is where it came from and blah blah blah, because that would be
exactly like the word zombie isn't even mentioned in this movie, which I love. Like clearly this is not a phenomenon that these our cast is aware of, that these characters know. Like I love a zombie movie where zombie is not a phenomenon within the context of the movie. Like us, obviously we know what it is and how it works, but these characters do not know, and I think they play upon that really well. Especially like that makes kind of sense why she's not listening to these warnings and connecting these dots that are clearly there, and then it's up to the characters themselves to kind of figure out the rules of how all this operates. But yeah, definitely disadvantage in the fact that how fast these zombies act and can run, and how they kind of seemingly can kind of act with a little bit of intelligence sometimes, sometimes not. Kind of has some curveballs. But yeah,
the movie doesn't really have like straight. I think that's the movie doesn't really have like straight rules about like what.
It's
like
kind of hit or
sometimes they
miss
seem
what
like
they can do.
sometimes they're just really dumb, and then other times like no, they have like a semblance of like intelligence. Yeah, I guess it just depends on the person.
I did hear one thing I just wanted to kind of comment on when you were saying what's missing in this movie is like the commentary on American culture, which is definitely a big talking point for George Romero's original, which I love. Someone did, and some comments that I read since like researching the movie afterwards. Unfortunately I watched this last night. Normally I like to watch our anniversary movie and then go right into the recording, but I had to watch this the night previous. So, or 2 nights actually, 2 nights ago, it was on Sunday.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit removed, but since then I was just, going through some rabbit holes on Dawn of the Dead, and someone made an interesting kind of point that I didn't really consider while I was watching it, but thinking back to some of the scenes, it seemed there was a case you could make that there was kind of some commentary on American culture in 2004 about like media consumption. And there are some scenes where like, I can't remember his name, CJ, one of the mall security guards, is kind of like kind of zoned
really
out. Yeah, the really mean one who actually has the best arc of anybody in the movie.
Yeah, he does.
There's a scene where he's kind of just like kind of tuned out, just kind of staring at the TV. I think he's kind of channel scrolling, and the our main cast does get most of their information on what's happening from the TV in the mall at the beginning when they all kind of link up. And honestly, actually, one of the highlights of this movie is the montage of like stock news footage at the beginning that's kind of like showcasing what's going on around the world to the tune of a Johnny Cash song. Super neat. And that honestly, that sequence was all news footage, which was actual real stock news footage, which I thought was really cool, but kind of adds to that commentary on media or news media and its role in 2000s culture, I think, which, like I said, not as poignant as like what George Romero was saying in 1978 with like, consumerism and capitalism and whatnot, but still kind of, I think it was present enough in Zack Snyder's that whoever commented that was on to something, which was neat. I didn't look at it with that perspective when I was watching it, but still pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I want to ask you, I mean, like you said, this is an ensemble cast and some characters get more screen time than others. But were there any characters that stood out for you that you liked? Are there any characters that you were? Yeah, I think you mentioned Mekhi Phifer already. That he wasn't one of your favorites in the movie. But anyone that you thought stood out?
Ving Rhames is always great. I love him. It was great. He really wanted to be in this movie too, which I thought was really neat. His role, I think he's like the de facto leader, he's one of the few people we really get a sense of like what his interests are, what he's trying to do. He wants to go to I can't remember where, Fort something to find his brother. Yeah. So we kind of want him to succeed, even though that doesn't end up becoming a reality. The character of hold on here, I'm forgetting because it's a couple of days removed. Michael, so Jake Weber, his character Michael, he's kind of the everyday guy. We find out later in the movie that he was, Best Buy employee, not much, a salesman. But he seems like almost the other lead that we're following, kind of like one of the main characters alongside with Anna. I mean, he was completely like, I thought he was kind of bland. He wasn't bad or good. I didn't recognize Jake Weber and anything else, so I kind of didn't really have that on my side to associate him with any other performances, but like he was perfectly fine, I think, in what he was doing. I liked him. He's likable. There's a lot of unlikable characters in this movie, but some more than others get turned around, which was cool.
Ty Burrell, especially Steve. I mean, Ty Burrell is also really good at playing people who are kind of snarky, so like pulled it off really well. But yeah, there are definitely some characters that stand out the most, and then some of you were trying to like I honestly agree with you about Mekhi Phifer, and it's so interesting because he's good in other stuff, and I like some
he's
of
an
the
8 Mile,
stuff
right?
he's been in. Yeah, he was in 8 Mile. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then he was in a horror sequel that you definitely didn't want to watch. We made you watch. He was in I Still Know You Did last summer.
Was he? Oh shoot, I forgot about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. He gets hooked in the neck.
Oh,
And but yeah, I I think Sarah Polley is like just a really good actress, and it's
where do I know her
crazy
from?
now she's a filmmaker. She directed Women Talking, and so
Oh,
she's like
oh,
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
What am I? Yeah, I knew
yeah.
the name. That's right.
So I'm glad, at least for the most part, the people who do appear to be the leads, I guess you would say, like Sarah Polley, Ving Rhames. I agree with you that Jake Weber is a little bland, but I guess of the like Ving Rhames, Sarah Polley, at least they have like strong actors playing, the de facto leads of the movie.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
at least there was that. Apparently, uh, Sarah Polley was the first choice for that part, and she agreed to take the role because she saw it as an unusual departure from the stereotypical portrayal of female characters, considering it to be anything more than somebody screaming and running away. As such, she admired Anna's resilience in the face of adversity.
I agree
Yep.
with that. Actually, thinking about it now, she is pretty competent female lead character. Absolutely, she takes initiative in several parts of the
Yeah,
story, which is
she's
great.
very proactive, and like
Yep.
she yeah, and I did like that Ving Rhames said he did the movie because he liked the diversity of the cast, as well as director Zack Snyder's track record of saying a lot with the camera without dialogue. And he also jokingly stated, "I want to be in this movie because the black guy lives," which I think is kind of
Yeah, that's right. Thought that was neat too.
But yeah, I think he is like the strongest performer overall. That like you said, he is the one that you kind of get to know the most, and I think it's hard in a movie like this when there's so many characters in it, because everyone's not going to get like an effective backstory here. It's just too
Right.
many characters, and but I'm at least the ones that lead it are, you're like, okay, I can root for them because they're very
Definitely.
likable, and then, of course, you get to know stuff about like Anna. But yeah, it is interesting once like the action switches to the mall. I mean, you have a bunch of characters there that if they add to the potential body count, and I guess that's another reason to have like a huge ensemble cast like this.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad you made that comment about the whole Russian thing earlier with it, because that was when I was watching
Like
it for this, I was like,
why?
that's really random just to make her that. I was like,
And that doesn't
I mean,
do anything like to the plot. It
no,
just seems like a
it
weird
adds
Zach
nothing to the story,
or
at
weird
all.
James Gunn quirk for some
Yeah,
reason. It doesn't do anything for me.
added nothing to the overall story. I was like, all right, that's just a thing. Okay, cool.
No. Wanted to mention too, this movie also, and I didn't even consider this until afterwards, but this Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead came out the same year as another famous zombie movie, but kind of on the other side of the spectrum here. But Edgar Wright's Shaun of the Dead also came out in 2004, which honestly I just really want to rewatch after watching this. I'd be curious if there were any notable similarities amongst the two movies, but thought that was super cool. I'd like to have covered that too. It having an anniversary this year too. Didn't even cross my mind.
And that is crazy. I haven't watched that movie in so long too. That's another one that would be fun to revisit, because I haven't watched it in a really long time. And I also didn't realize that they came out the same year. And I know I saw them both in theaters, but it's not something I thought about. Them having being released at the same time. Oh God, what was I gonna say? Oh well, I was also surprised that this movie is. And I don't have the director's cut of this movie. I guess there is a longer version of it.
Yeah, nor do I.
No, this is 100. It has a 100-minute runtime, which I guess isn't like. I think that's on the cusp of a horror film, because I feel like a really good horror film should be like 90 minutes in and out. But so this is like kind of like a little past that. But how did you feel about the overall runtime and like the pacing of the movie?
I thought it honestly like flew by pretty good. I thought the pace was, for the most part, it does become a little stagnant at some parts in the mall, but that's to be expected. I mean, like, they do find a place to hold up, pretty the mecca of places to hide out during a zombie apocalypse is the mall, right? So it's to be expected that they kind of post up a little bit, and we get a couple montage sequences of them sort of getting more comfortable with each other in the mall. But those scenes, some of the scenes I could have done without, but overall, I thought it was paced fairly well. There's some good moments of downtime while they are posted up in the mall. But when the action does leave the mall, when they're getting prepped to soup up the buses and head out, once for better or for worse, when they do get over to Andy's place, and then the plot kind of kicks up a notch again, and they do depart. I do
Yeah.
like how, I mean, it does go by kind of fast, but it kind of felt like the ball got rolling again once they leave the mall, which was nice, and we kind of see a little bit more zombie action and some the intensity and anxiety kicks it up a notch again, which is nice. Like the whole chase out of the mall and down into the sewers and into the bus and everything was kind of cool. We lose a few characters too, which is just good for the advancement of the plot. But I don't know. I thought it was all right. Did you find it dragged at all, or do you think the hour 40 was quick?
I thought it moved fast enough. Yeah. I've actually it made me kind of want to see the director's because I've never seen it. I don't know what it adds.
Do you know how much longer it is?
I'll try to look that up. I should have looked it up earlier, but I think the pacing is good. I actually think this movie is paced better than most of Zack Snyder's movies, and I think it's because there's not a lot of fat here. I mean, it's just like Zack Snyder now is someone that has been bogged down by like universe building and all that stuff in some of his movies, and there is not any of that here, and I think that works in the movie's favor and for the most part, that's probably why I do think it is one of his better, like probably this is the best movie to me at least, because you can tell that there was a clear direction on where to take it, and like he knew exactly what kind of film he was making, and I think that is what I got from watching it. Like he knew exactly what the movie was supposed to be, and I think that helps a lot with how the movie was paced. Like it's gonna make a fun action movie, and this is like taking elements, taking certain, like not taking every element from the original movie, but that I think that works in the movie's favor. Like I know I thought differently about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake that we covered, but what I liked about that remake too, though, is that it also wasn't just a carbon copy of the original. It had some things that were different.
No one wants a Gus Van Sant Psycho shot for shot dialogue ever movie. No. There's no merit in that.
That will just make it stand out as like, oh, this is not as good when it's a shot for shot remake. I thought it was interesting too that when they announced that James Gunn was writing this movie, there was backlash because he was a screenwriter on Scooby Doo.
I also just discovered that.
So there were a lot of people that were like, this is the wrong guy for the job. But Scooby Doo is another movie that went through a lot of changes studio wise. Like I heard that James Gunn, the original treatment for it and what Sarah Michelle Gellar, Freddie Prinze Jr., all of them signed up for was a much more adult movie than the kid Scooby Doo that we got.
Oh, okay.
So I just thought that was interesting that I can just see the internet in the uproar, like, oh, they can't let the guy who wrote Scooby Doo tackle this screenplay. But
I did read that there was some backlash to that too, and then actually I think he left. I don't know what his involvement in the production was beyond writing the script, but I did read too that he kind of like fucked off a little bit after the script was written to go write the next Scooby Doo. So clearly he was dedicated to his Scooby Doo movies, which are hilarious. Those came up recently in conversation, and I really want to get my hands on those because I haven't seen those since I was a kid. Like I don't even know if I could really say that I've seen them. Definitely not like with any memory. So I definitely want to check those out.
I don't know if I should be proud or ashamed that I saw Scooby Doo in theaters. On,
that would have been a moment.
I mean, it was the right time. It was 2002, so I was still just got out of high school, so it was wasn't like I could still see it and have fun with it. I do remember liking the second one more than the first one, but I'm always surprised to find out that he was I didn't know even with that, I didn't know he was involved with Scooby Doo for a long time until way later. And then also
it was a complete shock.
And then finding out that he was involved with this much later, then I guess I wouldn't really know back then. I followed a lot of that stuff, of course, but I wouldn't have known anything about James Gunn in 2004 to be like, oh, he wrote that. And so it makes sense that finding it out later.
Totally.
So you said that for you, this movie, film wise, because I said I think it's Zack Snyder's best movie, but you kind of mentioned some other ones that you thought were better. Like what? Why
I
like that for
definitely,
you?
I'm like Watchmen's way up there for me. I love that movie. It's definitely
Yeah.
got a longer runtime, but for me, it's that movie feels like it's earned. It's a fantastic film. Would love to cover it sometime. I guess it's not really near an anniversary, but so great. Um, 300 too, I look at very fondly. I mean, it's definitely like Zack Snyder porn. Like it's definitely
It
his
really
fingerprints
is.
all over. Like that is his
Slow
movie
mo shots.
for
A lot
sure.
of slow mo
I'm glad
shots.
you brought that up because that brings me to a
Yeah.
point I want to mention here in a minute. Yeah, then I guess I was none of his DCEU movies I would say like rank in my like I'm a little removed from Batman versus Superman, but I remember enjoying it just for the sake of like watching Batman and Superman fight. I liked Batfleck, so I think
Yeah.
a rewatch might kind of take me down a peg on that. But and I've seen Man of Steel. I was completely meh on it. Like I didn't love it, didn't hate it. I would really though like to see Sucker Punch, and I was going to ask if you've seen that.
It's been a while, man. I remember enjoying it. But yeah, it's been a while since I watched
Yeah,
it.
I really
I
want to
do
check
know
that one out.
I do know it's one of those ones that like it didn't do all that well when it came out, but it's one of his movies that people have like reevaluated since, and it definitely has like a cult following now.
Hmm.
Um,
I like
yeah, I
that
would like to watch that
steampunk
again.
vibe behind it, and it's like a female-led cast, like girl boss movie. Like it looks honestly like
Yeah,
super visually stylistic. Like I think I would really get behind it. So I'm interested in
yeah.
checking it out just for Zack Snyder's sake. I haven't really seen many of his recent. I honestly can't tell you how disinterested I am in his what are his Star Wars ripoff movies called?
Oh, why am I'm blanking on the name of it? I should remember.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
I'm
right.
on his. Yeah, I just don't even give a shit about those. Oh,
Rebel
Rebel
Moon.
Moon.
Sorry.
I haven't
Yeah,
seen
yeah,
that. I won't probably see a second part of it. I literally saw the trailer. There's literally a lightsaber like it's so ridiculous. And I didn't see his Army of the Dead movie either. But like honestly,
that's
rewatching this
entertaining.
kind of makes me want to see compare them a little bit. Did he
Yeah,
not do
yeah.
another zombie movie like around the same time?
He did. So he did Army of the Dead, and then Army of Thieves was like kind of like the offshoot of that because one of the characters is
Oh,
in
okay,
that. That's more of like a heist movie. It's not like a
but
zombie
not
movie at all.
zombie.
Yeah,
No.
yeah, yeah. No, no. And honestly, that wasn't bad either. I actually thought both of those were entertaining.
Okay.
Um, like I said, I mean, uh, I got to interview him once. He's super nice.
Oh, that's cool.
He is like he's very very nice. I uh, he's another person that has like a lot of like, you know, there are either a lot of fanboys that love Zack Snyder, or there's the opposite into
He's
that
got a
where it's like
cult
anti.
behind him for sure.
Yeah, and I I definitely think his earlier stuff, I guess that for just like be this Watchmen, th- I and then 300 definitely was a filmmaker that showed a lot of more promise, and I think he's kind of like
Then he's
uh a little
yeah.
bit.
Since I agree.
Yeah, and I think this being a debut though, like, is a really good solid start, like for a feature film debut. Uh and
Agreed.
pretty brave thing to tackle a classic like Dawn of the Dead as well. So it couldn't have been like an easy feat either. And like I think he's mostly successful. I do agree with you that the main problem is, if there is a problem, it is the screenplay. And that's
Mm.
more that it's like there's some questionable dialogue and like I mean, but uh,
This kind of felt
yeah,
amateurish to me. Like it was either written very quickly or written by somebody who was very young, like with not a, and maybe that was the case for James Gunn at the time. I don't know. It
yeah,
just felt like, yeah, I don't know. It wasn't very like there wasn't much intelligent dialogue. It was kind of like what we would call now as a quip on poorly written dialogue as like AI generated. Maybe not
right,
that
right.
bad, but like it just kind of felt that way to me. Like very, very low brow, just like very simple dialogue. But I mean, some character choices too. But my complaints with like Zach's direction were, I guess I would say, as much as I liked how much it made the blood and gore pop, like I think this movie's way too like cheery colored and bright for a zombie movie.
It
Like
really
its
is.
color palette is fucking all
Yeah,
it's so bright and beautifully like the colors are all over the place. I'm like, that doesn't really it kind of
it
contrasts
makes
what
it
you think of a zombie
less
movie.
gritty. Yeah, it made
Yeah,
it like
yeah,
kind of less gritty to
exactly.
be like so like yeah.
Very bright.
I actually I was thinking about that too. I was like if I was like what filtered are they? I don't know, it was like it is a very like
It's
brightly
good for
lit
like the
movie.
when characters are wearing blood-soaked clothing. Yeah, it looks that way. But I
Yeah,
think like something like The Walking Dead, which is a very like neutral color paleted show, gore and
Yeah.
blood seem very, they pop in that show too. So I don't think it really needed that kind of color. But it also sets it apart from the rest from zombie movies. Maybe that was kind of intentional. So I don't know. I don't really
Right.
think it resonates with me. But another thing too, like some of his like shots, like we do see some early Zack Snyder tropes here too. Like there's that shot for whatever reason, like Ving Rhames, his character uses a
Yeah.
shotgun this entire movie. And for whatever reason, like towards the end when they're like getting out of the mall, there's a sequence where like Ving Rhames is kind of like steps in and is kind of helping lay down some cover fire. And for whatever
Yeah.
reason, Zack Snyder does this super sexual looking slow-mo shot of him firing the shotgun and the bullet ejecting and landing on the ground. And it's like, why? Why now of all times in the movie to have that shot? You can tell he loves it slow-mo, obviously.
That shot reminded me of like, it feels like the school of like Michael Bay filmmaking. That's all I can think of. Is like Michael Bay like loves moments like that. And
yes, he
I
does.
mean, I guess I feel like Zack Snyder in certain ways as a filmmaker is like one of those people that's like, hey, I'm gonna make this like really kind of cool moment, and like it's gonna like all like whoever is watching this is gonna think this is so cool, and it probably is cool. It's probably cooler in his mind than it would be like executed. But yeah, I mean, that's what his stuff kind of reminds me of. Like, people at this point have made several comments about him using slow motion in pretty much all of his movies. I mean, I guess every director has to have a visual style. I guess
definitely,
and that seems to be his.
And it's not like so egregious in this movie either, as it is in his others. It's not nearly. It's not that bad. It's just a couple moments.
Yeah, this is not on the level of like Batman versus Superman. Like at least it hasn't happened like a lot.
Definitely.
But yeah, I'm glad you pointed that moment out because it is one of those things that's like, well, that wasn't entirely necessary. But all right. I mean, if anyone's gonna look cool doing that, I guess it's Ving Rhames. So there you go.
For sure. While we were talking about it, I am on his IMDb page though, and I don't see his Army of Thieves movie under his directing credits. Like I'd see Army of the Dead from 2021, but I'm pretty sure I thought he did two Army movies.
Maybe he just wrote it.
Well,
let me.
There's maybe he did just write it. Well, no, I have his writing credits up too, and
well, shoot.
I don't see it there. Oh wait, no, I don't have it. Yeah, Army of Thieves, based on characters by from 2021. So somebody else must have directed it.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah, I'm not even gonna bother.
He's actually in the movie. He's the lead. Yeah, you're right. He's the one that directed it. And the screenplay is written by Shay and based on the story he wrote with Zack Snyder. There you go.
Okay, interesting.
That's true.
Yeah, Zack Snyder has been a busy boy though. Certainly around the time that this movie came out too. Like he did 300. He would have started production on right after Dawn of the Dead, and then he went right from. Okay, I guess he did take some time off, but then his 2010s, like he's been a busy guy since, especially in the 2020s. He's been ramping up his stuff. I mean, he had his Snyder Cut come out in 2021, and his Army of the Dead movie, and then both those Rebel Moon movies are coming out. I guess the first half is 2023. Second half comes out in April, but he's got the Army of the Dead sequel TV series coming out, a Planet of the Dead movie in development too, which I'm just seeing for the first time. Like, holy smokes.
He is definitely busy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he did this 300 and then Watchmen. Was that back? Were those all back to back?
Yeah, that's right. And like we've seemed to agree, those are his best directing efforts for sure.
And that is why everyone is so disappointed after those three. I mean, I think it's like I mean, I guess Watchmen has some distractors because some say that I've never read the source material. I know the creator of that source material doesn't love the movie.
Yeah, he's very what's his name? Alan something. He's very protective of his Watchmen graphic novels.
Yeah. I never heard what his comments were about the limited series that was on HBO. I know critics loved it. But I personally thought, and I still think that Watchmen is way ahead of its time, and I thought it was like much better than people give it credit for.
I agree.
I think what ended up happening with that movie is that there was all these kind of bloated expectations. I mean, I remember the first trailer for Watchmen, and it looked amazing, and I thought it turned out to be an amazing movie.
Yeah,
but I mean, I think it coming out in the wake of like all these other comic movies is like kind of like what hurt that film in the long run. It's like, oh, like, it's not like Batman Begins. It's not like this. I think that was those
Right.
kind of expectations like
It's a
mess
good
with that
point.
movie. Um,
Yeah. Watchmen was obscure enough that it made a great property for him to adapt, whereas like the DCEU was like just way too mainstream. I don't think they really blend with his style of visual storytelling that well.
yep. And Christopher Nolan is another person that said he also believes that Watchmen is way ahead of his time. He loves. I mean, I
Yeah,
also
that
still
movie's
love. I
fucking
still love
awesome.
that. I love when Christopher Nolan like hypes up other people's stuff, and sometimes it's Fast and the Furious, and sometimes it's
Yeah,
Watchmen. But
yeah,
yeah, I, I might rethink when I haven't watched Watchmen in a bit too. Maybe I should watch
ooh,
that
dude,
sometime soon because
the
like
movie's
because
awesome.
I'm like I felt like I was saying with confidence that I think Dawn of the Dead is his best movie, but then the where we were talking about Watchmen, I was like I do remember like loving that. Um, if I don't change my mind, it's a close second. If I
Yeah,
had to like
I
think
think
about it,
there's things in Dawn of the Dead that are on his side for that argument, like the length of the movie. It's nice. There's not any fat in it, like you said.
yeah,
It's like visually still great. It doesn't have his abundance of his trademarks, like his slow mo stuff. So like that kind of makes it a little bit more palatable. But like I think James Gunn's screenplay just kind of brings this movie down too much for me to like consider it his best work. But I still think it's a competently made movie. He does a good job with it. But like, it's enough of like a reimagining and not close enough of a remake that I don't even really like comparing it to George Romero's. I think it's an apple to oranges comparison. Like, but if I had to, like, George's is really like for me definitely
yeah,
the version of this story that I like the most. But he does make a good zombie movie. I'll give Zach the credit where it's due. Like
yeah,
his what I want in a zombie movie, I find in this movie for the most part. It's really comes down to the characters and the dialogue are my complaints, and that's not a terrible
yeah,
thing to say.
right.
Yeah,
I yeah, I agree with you. And I think it too, like you said, you brought it up earlier. Like the only real comparison is that these characters are kind of hold up a shopping mall, and that's kind of where the similarities kind of feel like they
yeah,
end between the two movies, right?
definitely.
Um, so yeah, I I do like I said, you made a good point where you're saying like they're completely kind of different, so it's kind of hard to be
Yeah,
like which one's better. I mean, I guess there are going to be people that are like, yeah, Romero's is a classic. I don't know if even 20 years later are people calling this one the classic. I actually haven't like heard that. I don't know.
I agree. I haven't either.
I know that a lot of people like in the industry thinks it is one of the better remakes that have been made from for horror movies. I
Right.
can agree with that overall too. I think it is one of the better ones. Um, and some people think it's one of the best zombie movies, I guess, but I've never heard anyone kind of mention it in the same regard as Romero's movie, even all this
Yeah,
time later.
I think it's separate enough that I don't think it can really be compared. I mean, again, like I don't even really like. I don't think me personally I can compare it as a remake. It just doesn't feel right to me. I just feel like they're so different. I do think it's a great zombie movie, but for me personally too, I don't know if it's not in my pantheon of like the greatest zombie movies ever. It's
Yeah,
perfectly good though. Like I would recommend it to people for sure. Definitely seems more of like up the alley of like a casual moviegoer than like somebody who's really looking for a great zombie film, for instance. Like
right.
then I would recommend like George Romero's or even like 28 Days
Like,
Later. But like this is definitely like, mainstream zombie muckage. It's got everything you'd want. It keeps you perfectly entertained. And that is really not
yeah,
I think he set out and did what he wanted to do. I definitely don't get the idea that Zack Snyder was out to make a completely faithful adaptation of George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. And if
yeah,
that was the case, I think he successfully made something original enough that they're not too similar. So I can
yeah.
appreciate that. Unless that is what he was going for, then I would say he missed the mark. But I don't
Then
get
he
that
missed it.
impression.
Then he missed it
Yeah.
entirely. I wanted to ask you because I've always felt some type of way about the overall like ending of the movie.
E-
Like the overall fates of our remaining characters.
yeah.
How do you feel about that when you first saw it and looking at it now?
Well, because I didn't remember exactly. Like I remember so it's a big mad dash to the boat, Steve's boat, which,
Yeah,
and I remember that happening. But I honestly did forget about the whole. Um, is it? I already forget his name. Is it? Michael gets infected or whatever, stays
yeah,
behind. Like Yeah, I guess his death kind of hits, so that's unfortunate that he goes
Yeah,
out that way. I There's things about the ending I like, things I don't. I'll just try and get them all out here quickly. Like I don't really buy his and Anna's like sort of like relationship at the end. Like they have this like kind of like fruitless like goodbye scene, like where like obviously he
yeah,
can't come with, he's infected. But they've only been
right,
together like it's not really explicitly said within the movie, but it takes place over like a month from like May to
right,
June. I don't really buy that in that time. You know, she had a husband before this all went down. Like any like forced romantic relationship
right.
between
Yeah,
them that made it feel like they were like, you know, had this tearful goodbye. I didn't really buy into that. Did you? It
no,
just
I did
kind of
not
didn't
either.
really felt earned to me.
I do like Michael's redemption arc though. I mean, like it is funny because like it's that character is like you're like, oh, starts off so like kind of like tyrannical and annoying. You're like, oh, this guy is like so unlikable, and then they actually he has it is one of the better parts of the movie is that kind of like he gets to redeem himself a bit, and I thought that was
Are
really
you thinking
cool.
about?
But I don't necessarily.
You mean CJ, the guy that
Yeah, CJ.
sacrifices
That's what.
himself?
Yeah, CJ.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
CJ. That's what they
exactly.
about. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
I
yeah,
agree. That's one of the parts
yeah.
of
I
the
agree
ending
with
I
that.
really
Yeah,
like too, because he's an asshole to begin with, and then he kind of make even though he's like a dick throughout, he has a couple good points here and there. But then you're right, he definitely
yeah,
makes up for it in the end and sacrifices himself. He's got a great line that he goes out with and shoots that propane tank, and that's
yeah.
a pretty awesome moment.
Well, if you're like in this situation for like you said, what is a month, right? I I agree with you. I don't really buy the whole the tearful goodbye thing either. But I guess another part of me is like, well, if I was in that situation for like a month with these people, maybe there would be some kind of deeper connection
Yeah,
because of the
I
situation,
guess.
because of the situation you're in. But yeah, it's not the fault of like the actors not selling it. I think it's just the way it's written. It's just not
Yeah,
like
it
you're
just you
like
don't feel that way like by the time it happens, and I think it comes down to the screenplay more than the actors. I
yeah.
agree, but
Like they have like nice scenes with each other, but there's not enough of it to be like, oh, like I bought like whatever
yes,
this
exactly.
was.
I think it just comes
And
down
it's
to the runtime.
right, and it's really seemed like it's just done to have like another what they feel like is an impactful moment that doesn't really
Yes,
it doesn't necessarily land though. But
yeah.
yeah, I do agree with you on that.
I'm also kind of convinced that Michael probably just shoots himself through the mouth and leaves himself there in agony, then actually successfully kills himself. The way he's like looking up and putting the gun under his chin, textbook
Yeah.
no, but I guess
Yep.
for all intents and purposes, you know, he definitely dies. But so the part that I didn't really remember exactly how it ended is like the found footage montage of the characters
Yeah.
arriving to this island and like it already being populated by zombies. I'm kind of split on if I think it's an ambiguous ending or if it's trying to tell us that yeah, they also meet their fates when they get to the
I
island. Did you look at it one way or another?
so I felt I always felt so I love when like horror movies do this. I love it and I hate it. So it's like, hey, that was a really
Okay.
like solid like really solid like unexpected like hey you're rooting for them and you want the people who are left to survive, right? So you're like you want them to make it to the end and hope for the best. I remember when I saw it in theaters though, and I was like, it was over like that, and I was like, I want to respect that, but also I was like, I spent like this much time rooting for their survival, and like, well, they did they die? Like I guess they died, and so like kind of like felt really weird about it. I do like when movies take a chance like that, but it does make me feel like a certain kind of a way. Even watching it again for this, I was like, it sucks that at least they don't make it, and like that is what
Right.
what that ending implies to me is that they didn't. I don't know how they would
That
get out
I
of that little situation they were in.
I
um,
know. I didn't really know what to make because like I was like watching most of the credits, but like I did turn it off before like the screen went to black because like I kind of just thought, does it just do this for the entire time the credits are rolling? I didn't know, like I didn't want to watch all of it, so I'm assuming that
yeah,
like the camera, you know, it seems like someone drops the camera at some point, then we just get kind of like cuts of different like zombies and
yeah,
makeup and whatever. Okay, so
yeah,
yeah, it
yeah,
definitely
attack,
seems
yeah,
kind of like it's not that ambiguous, but like my interpretation before was that it was ambiguous, that like we don't know kind of how they make out once they get to the island. But
yeah,
I guess I'm sort of a sucker for cynical endings, so I guess I'm okay with that. I'm not too. There was nobody that I watched throughout the movie that I was like, yeah, I absolutely want everyone to make it out. I'm okay with how that went. I thought it was kind of also a bit of like an experimental ending, which was kind of neat. I
yeah,
could do without like the montages of like Steve with like the girls on his boats, and at one point there's like this really weird shot of like two girls like making out, and then you cut
oh,
back to like zombie footage. It felt
yeah,
really
yeah,
forced. weird, but maybe a symptom of the times. I don't know.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think it definitely was a symptom of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I can respect like an ending like that because it's like it. A lot of people complain sometimes about certain horror movies made here because the more like American horror movies don't really take chances like that. They do want it kind of wrapped up with like at least a happy ending for some of the characters, and
Yeah.
a lot of foreign horror films are not like that. They'll go
Exactly.
straight for the straight for the jugular, and it's like wow, like even the main chick didn't live. So it's like it's a lot of I can respect it, but it is weird though when you're like, oh man, at least I was hoping at least they got out or survived or like there's
Maybe
like a
they did.
happy ending for them.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know, man. It looked pretty bleak. I don't know how they got out of that.
Yeah. Mhm.
But yeah, I always wanted to because I know I have a friend that like hates that ending just because of that. Where
Oh,
it's like
really?
oh
Ed?
like
Okay.
because he was like I watched this whole thing like hoping some of them would survive and like all of them die and I was like that seems to be the implication, but honestly that might be the most realistic ending that
Yeah.
that movie could have because if there is some kind of like zombie apocalypse outbreak, who knows how far it spreads, and then that kind
And
of
they're
is like
running
what
zombies too. Yeah.
oh yeah who like that's
Odds are
probably
diminished.
what would happen. So I still like it, but I was
Yeah,
just because
I
I
like it
wanted
too. I kind of appreciate the leap of faith it takes. I think to me it's just kind of boring to have how many zombie movies where the survivors make it to some safe haven and everything's hunky
I
dory,
know
right? Like we've just seen that in so many. So I can appreciate the somewhat ambiguity, but not really, and that's fine with me. But we've made it all the way to the end. What do you
yeah.
think about a rate? Have you thought about your rating? I haven't posted my letterbox score of this yet, but I think I have it in my head. But I think this might be where we differ, but I'm just curious. I want to know for sure
uh,
first.
well, I like I said, I think it's his best movie.
Right. That's where I was like,
And,
okay,
and
maybe we
and
don't
I
feel the
would
same.
but for pure entertainment value, and I know there are still script issues, but pure entertainment value, I would give it a 4.
Okay.
I think it's very entertaining and it
You're
moves.
right. It is
Uh,
entertaining. Can't take that away from it.
there's a lot of action, and there's like if you're a horror fiend that loves gore and all that, there's a ton of that on display here. There's some really cool, decent makeup effects. Like you said, some of the stuff doesn't necessarily work. Some of the more CGI things, like the baby and all that, but for the most part, it's a good
Yeah.
looking movie. Maybe too good looking, like you said. It is a little bright in spots. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's purely entertaining, and I actually because like this, I think the whole remake horror train starts in 2003 with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then we got like a bunch of these afterwards.
Right.
Um, I'm glad this is one of the earlier ones in that lineup, and I think that probably is why it does stand out as being one of the better
Maybe that
remakes.
makes more sense that I think about it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, before we started getting it, like eventually every horror movie was remade, like When a Stranger Calls and like all
Yeah.
these random ones, but I think this coming out in like the beginning of that run, at least close to
Helps
the
it.
beginning, works in
Yeah.
his
And
favor.
before
So yeah,
zombie fatigue took over too, right? Because I don't think any of the
exactly
other yeah.
because this has like a huge. I mean, I know The Walking Dead is like based on other stuff too, but like I think that kind of uh it goes with like 20 days later, and then like, you get this. It seems like all of these kind of like influenced what kind of came next. So 28 days later, it seems like it influenced on the Dead. It seems like that those two might have influenced on some level how they created The Walking Dead, at least the look and vibe of it. So like, yeah, it really did kind
Definitely.
of restart this thing, especially for zombie films. And I think it works uh pretty well for the most part. But what's your score?
Well, I don't know what I would have ranked it the first time I saw it, so I don't know that I think I'm definitely going down, but like I'm putting it right in the middle. I'd go with like a 2.5. Like, and those points go to the entertainment because I really think the screenplay is kind of where I put a lot of the weight in this movie, and it took it
Yeah,
away. It lost a little bit of my respect, but overall, that's not a bad 2.5. Like, will I watch it again? Yeah, I would watch it again down the road for sure. I think there would be other
yeah.
zombie movies I would explore before I get back to this. If anything, though, it definitely makes me want to rewatch George's original, which I plan on doing as soon as I get
Yeah,
my hands on it. Honestly,
we should probably like cover. I mean, maybe it's a little further down the line, but we should probably throw that into like the when we do Tales of Horror again. Like, should be one of the movies that
yeah,
we
that would actually be a great
uh
idea.
one of the movies we cover. It's gonna be so interesting to get a reaction from people like get you giving your score, because Merc, when you gave your score for Bill
I
and
saw
Ted,
his posts.
yeah,
Oh yeah.
he felt some kind of way. He was like, oh, that 2.5, that sounded. I was like, but I was like, Jackson does a good job of explaining what that 2.5 means. It's not just like 2.5 wasn't that good. Like you still like
Right.
give credit where credit is due, and like it's not
For
like
sure.
your 2.5 is not like a scathing review for the
No,
most
no,
part.
no. It's
Like
it's
yeah,
a 2.5, a respectable 2.5. And that's
yeah,
the case with this one too. Like, there's things I like about this movie without a doubt. Like you said, if nothing, it's entertaining. But like, as just seeing, I am a big zombie movie guy, and there's just plenty more that I would rank ahead of this one. Um,
yeah,
yeah, and again, most of the faults of this movie that I have aren't Zack Snyder's faults. It's comes down to the screenplay, and I mean that is kind of like the foundation of your movie too. So like those issues are hard for me to overlook. But not a bad flick at all. I would recommend it to zombie fans without a doubt. So it has my stamp of approval for sure, just on the lower end.
yeah, yeah. Um, and I guess for a little like just facts about when the movie opened and how well it did. It actually dethroned The Passion of the Christ was the number one movie three
Oh,
weekends in a row. 3 weekends in a
wow.
row before Dawn of the Dead opened. Dawn of the Dead was projected to make $22 million in its opening weekend. It actually opened to 27.3 million when it opened. Ended up making 102 million worldwide, like you said, on a very slim like $28 million budget. So it was successful
Nice.
overall. Um, it and crazy. I mean, like this is what made these anniversaries hard to pick. One, it opened alongside Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. That also opened on March 19th. That was one anniversary that we were really intrigued about covering, but we also were still probably hurt by past lives and didn't want to revisit Eternal Sunshine like just yet.
Oh, low key, yeah.
Yeah, because that is what I remember about that movie is being like wrecked by it, especially when I first saw it, and then seeing it years later after similar situations, in real life.
Yeah.
So it hits you differently when you're like, oh, that hurts.
Once you have some lived
So
experience, like some of these movies are just become self sabotage.
yeah, they also released the opening sequence on cable television 4 nights prior to the theatrical release. That is a really smart way to market it, because
Ooh,
that is a one hell of an opening. Um, you also mentioned the release of Dawn of the Dead in the US nearly coincided with that of Shaun of the Dead, another zombie film distributed by Universal Pictures. In a February 2004 Variety report, a spokesperson at Universal revealed that the studio had greenlit Shaun of the Dead with the condition that Dawn of the Dead would be released here in the US first in order to avoid any conflict.
okay.
And like I said, it is Zack Snyder's, I believe it has a 76% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is his best reviewed, I guess, movie overall. um
Okay.
and maybe I mean that might say something to a lot of people who might think this is his best movie. I mean, but uh I it like it is a good debut, I will say that, as far as that concerned. And then reviews, like you said, were mostly positive. Roger Ebert liked it. That was always all over
Okay.
the place about horror movies, but he
He
liked it.
is. He's
He
inconsistent.
gave it a positive review and said that anyone paying to see it is guaranteed to get their money's worth. He also really enjoyed the film's opening sequence. Um, George A. Romero did not like the movie. um, in 2005, he spoke briefly of how dissatisfied he was with the Dawn of the Dead remake during an interview with actor Simon Pegg for Time Out. Romero said that although the remake had passed for a good action film, he felt it was aimless and more of a video game for that matter, as well as maintained he was not terrified of things running at me. So
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Like, I think that is what makes this movie scarier. Although I
yeah,
agree with them. It's an action movie. It's not much of a horror movie, I don't think, as much as it
yeah,
tries.
and
Um, that's
and
one
it's
thing I disagree
also the
though.
original was his baby, right? So I can see him being
Yeah,
like,
I
"Hey,
get
this
that
is a
too. Protective.
and he's not entirely wrong about the whole like video game comparison. I mean, it is a very some of the shots and stuff are kind of
Yep.
reminiscent of that. Um, and then when the movie turned 15 years old, numerous publications have named On the Dead as Zack Snyder's best film, with Dinda Geek considering it his magnum opus. And when they revisited the film for its 15th anniversary, they said that the movie still holds up. The film's flaws are mostly at the character level, though having a dumb zombie baby and a few underdeveloped red shirts in the mix is hardly a deal breaker. The action, particularly the opening scene and the propane explosion climax, in addition to the fantastic special effects makeup, the brief flirtation with found footage, and the reverence of its source text while introducing something new, makes 2004's Dawn of the Dead one of the best remakes on the market.
All right, there you have it.
However, some of that did sound like a backhanded compliment about, yeah, most of the issues are character level. That's script. Yeah, like you said earlier.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and then they also pointed out the dumb zombie baby. You know what?
Yeah,
That
it does.
moment, I know that moment was supposed to like you should have felt like, oh, that's awful, or oh, that's creepy, or oh, whatever. But it looks so bad that I was like, no.
It kind of takes away from the effect.
Yeah,
You're
from the
right.
effect. Yeah, it does. Yeah, like you should be like, oh, that should make you like feel some kind of way. And I was like, they should have put more money into how that looked.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the budget did get slashed after the failure of
that's
another
true.
zombie movie from the year before. I guess they were kind of doubting the appetite for zombies. So, I mean, what could have been? Maybe that scene would be completely different
Yeah.
with some more money behind it.
And then one last thing too, just Dawn of the Dead has appeared on several lists of the top zombie films, including number 3 by Rolling Stone, number 12 by Empire and by Collider, number 17 by IndieWire and Variety, as well as one of the best horror films of the decade, including number 3 by Dread Central, number 8 by Bloody Disgusting, number 52 on IGN. Yep, but even though, like I said earlier, even though I'm reading all that about people considering this, I still don't see anyone really mentioning it that way a lot. So I don't
I never do. 3 is a little egregious.
Yeah.
That 3 spot, but
yeah, exactly. And between you and I, like we probably have a lot of, talking about films with like our movies with like our friends or whatever. And there are a lot of movies that get brought up more than once and more than one occasion as being like, high up there. And I'm not taking anything away from the movie at all. I've just never heard it discussed in that way.
Nor have I, actually.
Yeah, but number 3 might be a little high.
A little high. Which is surprising to hear it from them, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wait, I think unless you have anything else you want to
we hit everything that I had on my talking points, so this is your turn to wrap us up, and it's been a great episode. I mean, as much as my review might have sounded negative, it was fun to dive back into this movie without a doubt.
Yeah, I had a good time watching it. It was a fun ride. I definitely recommend it. As far as like, it's still a really solidly entertaining movie. Like you said, like the guy said, the issues are on the character level and screenplay. But I mean, if you're just wanting to watch this for a just visceral action experience, I think it succeeds for the most part. So definitely one that's worthy of your time. And I'm glad that you guys actually chose this one as your pick. And we're gonna do the same thing in April and all the months going forward. We have not picked which April ones we're gonna put on for you to choose from.
Those are coming soon.
Those are coming very, very soon. But yeah, you have this was a good way to get back into this because we were really happy when we did this, or like you guys chose Pirates of the Caribbean last year, but then we jumped in at Tales of Horror and we kind of like put letting the listeners choose one of the anniversaries on the back burner. But I'm really happy we're doing it now because there are a lot of anniversaries and we can't really pick all of them. So
we need help.
Yeah, we'll put some of the onus on you guys. And I actually did get the count. I put it on our story. We did 31 anniversary episodes last year.
Okay.
I was surprised that there were that many. That was a lot.
I
actually had to recount at one point because it seemed less, but then some of our Tales of Horror episodes were also anniversary episodes too for some of those movies, so that bumped up the count. But 31, and most people on our poll said that they think that we will top that this year and have more than 31.
Thanks for having faith in us.
But yeah, that wraps up episode 160 Back to the Blockbuster. I can't believe it's gotten that far. Like we probably had to like talk about what we're gonna do for episode 200 at
sooner than we think. Yeah,
exactly. Thank you guys for listening. As always, if you want to check us out, you can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, Spotify. But Playlist Studios, they are our podcast network, and they are lovely. They've been very, very great, especially recently as we been cranking out a lot of episodes. Also, they're helping us kind of develop the YouTube page, which we're going to like dive into more very soon. I finished my introduction video for that. I have Jackson's, and we're going to add those to the YouTube channel and be posting a lot more on there, and not just the episodes, but just a lot more reels and content to kind of share with you guys, to kind of expand on the Back to the Blockbuster brand. And I think that is a good I'm excited for that next step, because I think that's gonna be really fun, and because we could probably do a lot with that promoting and everything as well. And yeah, like that's about it for this one. I'm like I said, really happy that you guys picked Dawn of the Dead. It was a really good choice. It makes me confident in your picks for our future anniversary episodes.
Absolutely.
And yeah, as always, my name is Gaius. This is my boy Jackson. It's time to sign on off. Peace out, guys.
Absolutely, guys. Take care, and thanks for joining us again. We'll see you next time.